Yes, Venkat.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So start our today's session. Hope everybody joined. So anybody before starting our today's session, people who did not uh, completed the practice of previous tasks or use cases, so make sure you complete, because we're almost coming to the end of the sessions. So Dataproc, Cloud Function, and Workflow, these three services are remaining. So and then we have to see a real-time pipeline implementation, how we do in real-time projects. Okay, so that these are the things that are pending. So Dataproc, we will be completing by next week. So we have to discuss Spark before Dataproc, and then PySpark, and then Dataproc. So three things. So Dataproc, there won't be much to do with Dataproc as a service, but you have to understand the core of Dataproc, which is PySpark. Okay, so fine. So before going to start our today's session, any questions or queries or concerns here, or anybody have any queries? It may be related to practice or uh, services or anything. No, right? Okay. So let's move on to our today's session. So today we will start our me.
Yes, Venki.
Yeah, sorry, I lost network in a while. So, yeah. So let us understand how actually we can try to understand what actually is the data proc, right? So if you see here, data proc, right? Okay. See here. So here, if you see, this is data proc service, right?
Venki, please share the screen.
Okay. Okay. 1 second. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So here, if you see, this is the Dataproc service. Once you go here, you can enable the service. So it will enable the Dataproc service for you. Okay. So this is the Dataproc. Okay. So this Dataproc, so it's a platform as a service, and it's not a complete serverless. Okay, you have serverless also, but you majority of the times we don't go for serverless in Dataproc, because you need to have the control on infrastructure. Now let us understand what actually is the Dataproc. So Dataproc is a fully managed GCP service for big data workloads. Okay. Okay, so a fully managed GCP service for big data workloads. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So if you want to process big data, or if you want to store big data, then you can use Dataproc. Okay, but you can ask a question. Hey Venkat, we have already a big query. Why we need Dataproc? Okay, we have already a big query. Why we need a Dataproc? Now You just need to understand the difference, guys. So big Dataproc is a managed platform that has been built with open source technologies. Be very very clear. Okay, so BigQuery is the Google's proprietary technology. Okay, so now let us understand the quick difference, right? So BigQuery is Google's proprietary, Google's technology. Okay, now if you see the Dataproc, right? So Dataproc is a platform which will be which will be made with a lot of open source technologies like Hadoop, Spark, Hive, right? So for example, I have a lot of Hadoop platform, on-premise Hadoop platform. Assume I have n number of Hive jobs, Spark jobs that are running in my system, right? I want to just lift and shift my platform into Google Cloud. Okay, in that case, instead of rewriting the entire logic, instead of doing development from the scratch again for that migration, what we do is we use this Dataproc platform in the Google Cloud, wherein all the open source technologies are coupled together and they are providing as a service, right? So you can sorry, you can pretty well lift and shift your big data engineering projects, okay, into Google Cloud by using this Dataproc. Okay, now Dataproc is a fully managed GCP service for big data workloads. Okay, so you can store big data in a Dataproc. Okay, you can process big data in Dataproc. Okay, and if you see one more comparison between the BigQuery and Dataproc, BigQuery can store only the structured data. Okay, when you are loading data to BigQuery, that means you have to maintain a properly structured data. Okay, but Dataproc can process unstructured or semi-structured data as well. Okay, if you have a log file, if you have a XML file, right? So you have a text file, you still can read those files in Dataproc and process them and give proper structure to that files and then load it into BigQuery. So this is one difference that you need to understand. And the cost wise, if you see, Dataproc is a very less cost consuming service compared to your BigQuery. Okay, compared to your BigQuery, because in BigQuery, the the service itself is a serverless service. Okay, the service itself is a serverless service, and you don't have any control on the machines that are running in the background, and and the number of clusters that are running in the background, right? Only you have the control on the slot level, the execution thread level, right? So but in Dataproc, that is not the case. You can decide the compute, right? So you can decide the compute and you can define the auto scaling policies. You have the full control on the infrastructure management. Be very very clear. Okay, so that is the reason whatever the jobs that you are developing, according to those jobs you can provide compute. Okay, but it is automatic in BigQuery's case. But BigQuery slots are a bit costly compared to your Dataproc machines. Okay, so that is the difference. So these two services, we need to understand the difference, guys. So BigQuery is a cloud data warehousing service. Be very very clear about it. BigQuery is a cloud data warehousing service where you can create your data models, Star or Snowflake, or you can store huge volumes of data into the tables and then you can query. Okay, and you can connect your tables to the streaming applications or dashboarding reporting applications or machine learning applications. That is where your BigQuery serves the purpose. But your Dataproc is something which can be used for the processing majority of the times. Be very very clear, data processing power, right? So let us take an example. You are getting a 100 GB text file every day. Okay, you are getting 100 GB text file every day. Now you have a use case wherein you need to process that text file, right? 100 GB text file, and then get a proper structure out of it, do aggregations, and then uh, s- present it to the dashboarding. Okay, this is the use case, assume. Now you cannot directly load the text file to BigQuery because BigQuery demands a schema, is it? So you have to create a table before loading the file, right? So if you have a Parquet, Avro, CSV, then pretty well you can load the file into BigQuery and then write SQLs on top of it. And but in Dataproc, you have a feasibility to read the text files. You have a feasibility to read the log files. You have feasibility to read CSV, Parquet, Avro, anything, whatnot. So you can do any file-based processing in Dataproc. Okay, and it is helpful if you have any kind of on-prem applications. Let us take an example. I already have a big data pipelines in production in on-premise system. I have a 500 node Hadoop cluster, and in that Hadoop cluster, I have lot of jobs that are running in as per the schedule. Okay. Now, if you want to lift and shift those jobs, okay, let us say you have thousand Spark jobs that are running in, and they are doing a lot of functionality and they are loading all the Hive tables. Okay, now if you want to simply migrate those jobs to your Google Cloud Platform, this Dataproc service will help you a lot, because it supports your big data processing framework called Spark. Okay, so now how it is doing. So as a developer, Dataproc is just a UI, guys. Be very very clear. Dataproc is just a UI. What you can do as a developer is Dataproc comes with Hadoop support, Spark support, and Hive support, right? So you can use your big data technologies, open source technologies in the Dataproc, okay, and you can build your applications. But recommended way of doing things, right? Recommended way of doing things in GCP data engineering is the raw layer after the data ingestion. The raw layer will be in GCS. Okay. Once the data has been pushed to GCS, then immediately your data proc jobs will trigger. Okay. Immediately your data proc jobs will trigger. This data proc jobs will read the data from GCS. Okay. And then process them. Okay. And then process them. So you'll get a lot of files, right? So in real time, you may see hell lot of files in the production environment you will be getting, right? So you will be reading all those GCS files from Dataproc and process them, and then load it into BigQuery. Okay, once the data has been processed, you load it into BigQuery stage layer. Okay, and then you will call a storage procedure which will load the data from stage layer to target layer. Okay, so that we'll discuss that. The interconnection we'll discuss. Okay, now assume you have a storage layer called GCS. Okay, and you have a processing layer called Dataproc, and then you have a loading layer called BigQuery. Okay, you have a loading layer called BigQuery. So you need to understand this sequence, guys. How we connect these services, I'll explain you in the workflow. Okay, don't worry. But you need to understand this sequence of data engineering pipeline. Every day your NiFi will be pushing according to the schedule. Every day at night 11 p.m. your NiFi pipeline will trigger. Okay, once NiFi pipeline will trigger, it will go and read the data from SQL server or some other file based locations. NiFi will read the data. Okay, and then it will push the data to Google Cloud Storage. Okay, it will prepare the path on the fly, and then it will push the data to Google Cloud Storage. Then immediately a event will generate, and which will trigger the data proc job. Okay, so then Dataproc will read that respective file and process it, and then load it into BigQuery. So this is how your data engineering pipeline will be happening. Now you will schedule your NiFi job and then you will leave it. So that's how actually we develop the data engineering pipelines. Okay. So now how we will use the Dataproc in real time. We though we have Hadoop and Hive, we don't use the Dataproc for Hadoop and Hive. Be very very clear. Okay, so in real time projects, I haven't seen any project is using Hadoop and Hive in Dataproc, but majority of the times what we do is in our organization we use Dataproc for the Spark based processing. Okay, we use Dataproc for the data processing only, big data processing only. If we want to store the data in Dataproc, then we need to go for Hadoop and Hive. But we already have storage layers, right? We have GCS, we have BigQuery. We can persist the data there, right? But we don't need Dataproc especially for storing the big data. So that is the reason what we do is we use Dataproc only for the processing. Okay. Okay. Now we know what is a Dataproc. So Dataproc is a managed service provided by a Google Cloud, which can be used for the big data storage and big data processing workloads. Okay, and it is a combination of open source technologies like Hadoop, Spark, and Hive. Okay, so if you see the Dataproc documentation, right? So you'll get to know. Yeah, here if you see, Dataproc is a managed Apache Spark and Hadoop service that lets you take advantage of open source data tools for batch processing, querying, streaming, machine learning. Dataproc automation helps you create clusters quickly, manage them easily, and save money by turning clusters off when you don't need them. So it is a platform, guys. See here. So it is just a UI. When you simply talk about Dataproc, it's just a UI where you can go and create your clusters. Okay, because if you want to run your Spark jobs, you need clusters to be created. Okay, so similarly, you can monitor your jobs that has been submitted, and you can define auto scaling policies, right? So in cloud, the major advantage is auto scaling, right? So you can define the auto scaling policy, right? You have lot many options here. So that is the reason you can pretty well use this Dataproc for data processing. Now if you see in on-premise systems, if we want to create a cluster, right, a group of nodes, right, so they will take at least a month or 2 months time to create the cluster itself, to set up and install Spark, Hadoop, everything, right? So but here in cloud, right, we are coming up with agility, right? So agility meaning effectiveness of the system to react quickly, right? So now what we are doing, we will try to click one button, that's it. So on the fly it will create the cluster within a minute. Okay, within a minute it will create the cluster and it will install and configure all the Spark for you, and then it makes the cluster ready. Okay, you just need to submit the job, that's it. So in our data engineering pipelines, what we do, as and when we have the data, we go and create the cluster, and then we develop the job for processing, and then we submit the job to the cluster, and then once the processing is completed, once the job is successful, then we remove the cluster. If the cluster is running more time, then it will cost you. Okay, so what we do, we actually submit the job. We once the job completion, we'll delete the cluster. Again next day, again it will create the cluster on the fly, because it won't take much time, right? So it won't take much time. It will be uh, uh, just a minute it will take to create the cluster. So once you have the cluster up and running, so I mean you can submit the job, and then once the job is completed, you can remove the cluster. So that's how we use Dataproc in real time. So similarly, it depends on the use case, right? So it depends on the use case. So when, well, let us take an example. A application, front end application is there where users can upload files. Okay, users can upload files. They can submit inputs, some inputs in the files. Okay, now in the back end, depending on the number of inputs, you can route your clusters. Okay, meaning you can segregate your cluster: small cluster, medium cluster, large cluster, right? So depending on the inputs, you can actually input data also, you can segregate, you can create that that respective cluster, and then submit that respective job. Let us take an example from the UI, or else from the data size. You have small data. Okay, then depending on the size, you can route your code to the respective cluster. But in the on-prem, you don't have that feature, right? So you'll have a very bulk cluster. You can actually submit jobs to that bulk cluster. So that is how in on-prem it works. But in cloud, we have a flexibility to create and play with these clusters. Okay, fine. So in Dataproc, we what we do, we create clusters. Okay, we submit our PySpark jobs. You just need to remember these points, guys. So we create clusters. So in Dataproc, what a data engineer will do, we create clusters. Okay, and then cluster, right? So cluster is a group of nodes, group of machines or nodes connected in a single network. Okay, now here the first and foremost thing that we do is we create the clusters, and then we develop jobs, develop PySpark jobs for big data processing. Okay, this is one of the responsibility that we do in Dataproc. Okay, and then we submit these jobs to the clusters that we have created. Deploy, we call that process as deployment of processing jobs or PySpark jobs to Dataproc clusters. Okay, this is one more responsibility. Another thing is you can monitor your jobs, monitor the submitted jobs. Okay, you can monitor it from two places, Yarn or jobs UI. Okay, and then integrate. Okay, integrate Dataproc with BigQuery, GCS, workflow. So these are the things that we do in Dataproc, guys. Okay, so we create clusters because we need compute, right? So when we want to process huge data, we need compute. So that compute we can create in Dataproc. Okay, in BigQuery we don't have that because it's a serverless, right? So when it is a serverless, the infrastructure will be in the control of your Google cloud, right? So but in Dataproc you can select your machines, you can select your configuration of your machines, you can create your clusters according to the configuration mm, declared by you. Okay, so there is another concept in Dataproc called serverless Dataproc, but it's more costly. Okay, so we'll also see that part as well when time comes in. So but for now focus on the Dataproc service where actually we took control over infrastructure. Okay, so now any questions? I'm just giving a pause here. Any confusions or questions with respect to Dataproc? I'm just giving introduction. So what we do in Dataproc and what is the Dataproc? Okay, so any confusions?
No, Venkat, clear.
Okay, so Ranganath, Prakati, Anusha, any questions or confusions you can ask?
No, Venkat.
Clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
clear.
okay, great. So now we know what is a Dataproc service. Okay, and we know what we do in Dataproc. Okay, so we do big data processing in Dataproc. That's the core responsibility. Okay, now in Dataproc, along with the data processing, we do integration. I mean, we communicate with multiple different services from the Dataproc. Okay, and then we do develop PySpark jobs. Okay, so and then we monitor the jobs. So these are the things that we do in Dataproc, right? So now the next thing that we need to understand is, okay, so in Dataproc we do data processing, that is clear. Okay, but how we do, what is there, what is the processing component in Dataproc. Okay, if you take BigQuery, we have a Dremel, right? We have a Dremel which will take care of entire processing part. Okay, once we run the query, it will take and it will execute it in the slots, and then it will give the results for us. But in Dataproc, what is the processing component, right? That processing component is Spark. Be very, very clear. The processing component in Dataproc is Spark. Okay, so Dataproc is all about Spark, guys. Okay, the UI, monitoring, deployment, everything you can learn in a single day. Okay, everything, even clusters creation also. Ev- I mean, all the remaining things that are here, right? Apart from develop PySpark job, apart from the second point, the remaining everything you can learn in a one session. Okay, you can learn in a one session because those are very much easy. Now, if you see, if you want to monitor jobs, okay, if you go here, okay, there is a tab called jobs. You just go and then see the jobs that are here, and it will give you the status. Once you click on the job ID, you will see the log. That's it. If you go to clusters, you can create your cluster, just a click, right? So you can create your cluster, and then you can give your machine types, and then it will get created on the fly, right? So within a minute it will create it. So it is just very simple things these are. Okay, playing with the Dataproc UI. But remember, developing a job in Dataproc using PySpark is the most important thing that we need to learn. Okay, the most important thing that we need to learn. Okay, now what we do is we'll go with the same sequence. Okay, we'll go with the same sequence that is declared here. We see how to create a Dataproc cluster. Okay, and then we see how to develop a PySpark job. Before going to development of PySpark job, we need to know the Spark internals. Okay, what is the Spark first? People who doesn't know, or people who are not from the data engineering background, we need to learn Spark. Okay, Spark is the core technology in big data or data engineering. Be very, very clear, guys. You have to know, or you have to learn Spark. Okay, so I know SQL, yes, pretty well, good, but SQL will help you up to some extent. But if you know Spark, this will make you as a real data engineer. Okay, this will make you as a real data engineer. You have to learn Python, SQL, Spark. These are the three things. Remaining everything is all about your skill, guys. So, but these are the core things that you need to learn: SQL, Python, and Spark. Okay. So now we have to start Spark. Okay. I'll take a week for Spark sessions only. Okay. We see what is Spark. What are the Spark components, internal components, and then we understand how to write a Spark program. What is PySpark? What is Scala Spark? Right? So all these things we will understand first. Okay. Once we have good understanding in Spark, then we will come back to this Dataproc. Okay. This Dataproc is as I already told you, right? It's a very simple UI. Before this Dataproc, what you need to know is you need to know what is Spark. Okay, once we have that clarity on Spark application development, then we will come to this Dataproc. But we do things in Dataproc only, don't worry. So we create clusters, and then we discuss about Spark. Okay, once we have a good understanding in Spark, right? Spark internals, job submissions, right? Configurations, then we will see, we complete all these things in couple of sessions. That's it. So the major thing we need to concentrate here is Spark only. Okay, so we will discuss about that from tomorrow. Okay, so in Dataproc, what is Dataproc and what are the things that we do in Dataproc? Okay, hope everybody got some understanding. So I request you to go and explore about the differences between BigQuery and Dataproc. Okay, because people may get confused. We have BigQuery, why we need Dataproc again, right? So there are functional use cases, guys. So you cannot say that both are similar. Okay, you cannot say that both are similar. So BigQuery will be serving some purpose. Dataproc will be serving some other purpose. It has its own advantages and disadvantages, and data BigQuery also have own advantages and disadvantages. So first you need to get that clarification. Okay, so I have given you a couple of differences, but I request you to go and explore the differences between BigQuery and Dataproc. Okay, so there is one more processing component from Google called data flow. Okay, data flow is another processing component in BigQuery along with the Dataproc. Okay, but that is serverless. Again, it is like BigQuery and it's a proprietary tool by Google. Okay, so data flow internally uses Apache Beam. So that's the processing technology it will use. So majority of the times in real times we use data flow for data loading. We don't do any kind of a processing logic in it because it will scale automatically and it will cost you a lot. Okay, so that is the reason we use data flow for the data loading. Okay, if we want to load the data from Parquet to BigQuery, if we want to load the data from Avro to big table or big another service, any data store service, then we use data flow. Okay, but the processing will be completely controlled by Dataproc. Okay, so what kind of processing we do in Dataproc? So the same thing, guys. So wherever we go, we do aggregations, we do filtrations, we do joins. Okay, we do a lot of semi-structured processing. Let us take an example. You have a lot of text files, and what we do, we read those text files, we match regular expressions, and then we extract the required information from those text files, and then we provide proper schema to it, and then we will write it into the BigQuery. So the processing part involves a lot many things, guys. It's not pretty easy. We do add derived columns, right? We do add derived columns using case when statements. So lot of processing, whatever we do in SQL and Python, right? So combinedly we can do it in Dataproc. Okay, but the underneath execution platform, right? So the processings that are happening are same. So whatever you have done, row number, rank, dense rank, joins, filter, all processing logics are same. Concatenation, case when statements, null handling, everything is same, guys. Everything is same. No change in the processing functionalities, but there is a change in the execution platform. Be very, very clear. Once you have written the processing logic, how it has been executed is different in Spark. That's the only thing. Okay, how it is executing internally is different. Now if you write a SQL query in a SQL server, what it will do, it will utilize the internal resources of that machine, right? So for the compute, if you write a Python program, what it will do, your Python program will take the compute from your local machine, and these are not distributed environments. Be very, very clear, these are single server environments. Okay, client and server architecture. We send the request, we execute the code, and then the kernel that is running in your machine related to Python, it will take your code, it will compile, and then it will execute your code in the machine, and then it will return the results to you. Similarly, in SQL Server also, when you install your software, SQL Server software, it occupies some compute. Okay, the some RAM, and then some drives disk space, and then some compute, right? And when you run your query, it will use those resources, and then from that machine only. Okay, and then it will return the results. But in case of a Spark, right, it is different. The complete execution itself is different. So that is what you need to understand. But on the top layer, whatever the processing logics that you are writing in SQL or in Python, maybe how you will do in Spark, that's the only change that you will be having. on the top layer, but the internal layer is very, very important. Once you have written a logic to filter the data in PySpark, how it will be executed internally is the major thing that we need to understand. Okay, so that things we will focus on, and from tomorrow get ready to face one of the most challenging big data processing framework called Spark. Okay, so we'll discuss about Spark internals. I'll make sure by end of next week or so we'll be ready with the Spark. Okay, you can you can definitely I'll give you use cases, guys. So again we are jumping into the task based thing, so I'll give you use cases as and when I feel that you are comfortable with the Spark. Okay, so that's all I have for today, guys. So we'll start Spark from tomorrow. Okay, and then we will try to see create clusters also tomorrow. How to create cluster, how to delete cluster, all these things we will see tomorrow, and then we will start the introduction to the Spark. Okay, we will dig deeper into the Spark in coming week, and we'll get complete understanding on Spark. Okay, once we have that, then we will see how we can use Dataproc to submit, integrate all those things. Okay, so anybody have any questions or confusions, clarifications needed? Please ask. I'm here to help you.
Yeah, I got one question.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Dataproc, we are while you processing, we need to use PySpark, right?
Yes.
But in BigQuery, in SQL Python,
No, in BigQuery, uh,
while
your
processing.
processing engine is Dremel, right? Is it?
Okay, okay,
Your language is Python or SQL. See, the communication to the BigQuery is happening through Python or SQL or some other JavaScript UDFs or something. Okay,
okay,
but underneath the processing engine for your BigQuery is Dremel, correct?
okay,
Now in Dataproc, the language will be Python only, because you are communicating to Spark using Python only, but the execution engine is Spark here.
okay, okay.
Your program that you are writing in Python,
Python.
okay, or SQL, you can execute the internal execution engine is Spark, but in BigQuery it is Dremel.
Dremel.
Okay, in
Okay, okay.
Dremel we have seen there will be root node, leaf nodes, mixers,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
and slots. So similarly, how actually a Spark execution engine will work, and how we need to write a Spark program or Python SQL combination we can utilize in Spark. Okay, so that thing is different compared to your BigQuery.
Yeah, clear.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so that's all I have for today, guys. From tomorrow, we will try to discuss about Spark. Okay. Uh, Thank you so much for joining once again tomorrow.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Venkat.